Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic is war.
Viaduct at Arnsberg. It's from the Ruhr.
Now, the world has been unfortunate enough to see two of them. But today, I want to discuss what would happen if there was a third. And more specifically, what would the effects be on films if there were a third war? After that, we will take a look instead on the other side of the coin. What would happen to films if a war doesn't break out? Firstly, we'll go over what if the war actually happens. Whew. Alright, let's talk about if it happens, but it's only a short war, meaning less than 2 years. So, during this 2-year period, or however long it takes, as long as it's less than 2 years, I believe patriotic films will start to find a new footing, especially in today's world. Patriotic films will begin by our governments funding heroic war narratives, while different studios from different countries, especially overseas, start to conflict one another with their narratives and what they are trying to tell their audience. So other than that, PTSD cinema will take a very, very big limelight. It will be in the limelight a lot. So what this means is basically war documentaries will be stories from veterans, and they will be the ones detailing what happened in the war, and mental health issues will start being prioritized, especially for those in the army. Right, now let's go into if it's a long war, meaning it'll take more than 5 years. Now, in this scenario, the world is already in a very, very bad state, but films still exist. What I think will happen is that propaganda films will start taking a front hold. Governments will start seizing control of cinemas to demonize the enemies in films, especially in action films that will portray their own government in a good light. Besides that, they will start to boost morale of their military troops via films, meaning the government themselves will start producing films in order to make their own troops more motivated to go out and fight the war. Besides that, I believe underground guerrilla films will start arising. Directors begin shooting on smuggled equipment and circulate anti-war films. We can see something similar happening in World War I and II, where hippie movements started arising, especially when the war took a heavier toll on its citizens. People will find a way to fight the war, be it physically, mentally, or through films.
And then the ultimate, or what seemed the ultimate.
Полевой столб, поднимающийся с земли, быстро увеличился в объеме. Через несколько секунд после взрыва диаметр...
Now, if it gets to the point of a nuclear war, it's safe to say that Earth would never be the same. But how does it look like for films? Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look much better. Film industries, with a lack of a better word, cease to exist. The state of the world would cause distribution networks to be destroyed, leading to film studios closing down and possibly losing out on decades worth of films. Now, another point to bring up during this quote-unquote nuclear war period, if it were to happen, a lot of our storytelling would revert back to our ancestors' methods of survival storytelling. What this means is that survivors would document life and stories, possibly on their phones, possibly with another medium of taking notes. These homemade videos or homemade drawings would be based off raw testimonies, and in the possible future where networks are re-established, it is possible we see a rise of these films being created into actual feature-length films. So now we go into taking a look into what would happen if the war doesn't take place whatsoever. The first and most predominant aspect that we would notice is that a lot of global productions would start to grow. cinema would go international. Like, what I mean by this is K-dramas, Bollywood, and even anime. These three especially would capture worldwide audiences, leading to the entire population or close to it learning about a whole new subculture of cinema. Other than that, new regional voices would be discovered. What I mean by this is, if you take a look at the current landscape of film, it is predominantly maintained by Western films and with Asian films currently taking a rise. With regional voices being discovered, if a war wouldn't take place, African and Latin American studios receive worldwide attention as well as investment from overseas companies, allowing them to prosper, allowing them to show off their incredible culture in the form of films. Right, another thing that would happen if the war doesn't break out is that online streaming would fully dominate. And I mean fully dominate. We even see it starting a little bit now with the rise of AI. But if the war doesn't happen, it would allow more technological advances, leading to AI filmmaking maturing at an exponential rate. So with the power of AI being accessible to the wider public, studios would start cutting budgets and indie creators would produce films with minimal crews, relying predominantly on AI to finish the work and encapsulate the vision, if you will. Now, other than that, we can already start to see the people of today having their phones glued to their faces. But it is a very possible future where the phones and their screens would literally be glued to their faces. Now, what I mean by this is the introduction of VR cinema. Right now, as it stands, we have 3D cinemas with a few 4D cinemas sprinkled in over the course of a few years to test out the technology. But in a few years, it is possible to see that fully virtual reality headsets becoming the new norm in theatres, which would allow for a lot more immersive and tailored viewing experience to all of the customers. Another thing that would happen if the war doesn't take place is that speculative war fiction would arise once more. Now, we saw this a little bit with World War II, but in World War III, Cold War spy thrillers would definitely make a return. Now, what I mean by this is that basically public paranoia about the possibility of a war would fuel the creation and the production of espionage films and TV shows. Something similar to Mission Impossible or Men in Black would be born again, but with a war theme to it. Now, other than that, sci-fi genre would grow exponentially. What I mean by this is that films would start to explore cyber warfare as well as race-ending scenarios. If you guys have seen Independence Day, it was a product of World War II, and something similar would be born out of World War III. Most definitely.